Welcome to another edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I'm Dan Myler, with me Ryan McDowell and Matt Price. Matt, it is week 2. In fact, most of it is in the books, and there was some good and there was some bad, and there certainly was some ugly when it comes to fantasy and real football in week 2.
Yeah, things we thought might be the new truth from week 1 are no longer the truth. We have satellite backs that we thought we were going to be involved and are not involved. We have the opposite of satellite backs that we thought weren't going to be involved and now all of a sudden are involved. So got a lot to get through today.
Lot to get through, Ryan. Lots of drops and some ugly football for sure. There are a lot of takeaways for sure, and not all of them good.
No, not very many of them good, honestly.
Right.
It was just an ugly day of football, like you said. Injuries, more injuries, lots of disappointing performances, most of them on my personal fantasy teams. It was an ugly day.
It was an ugly day, and there certainly were some highlights. Derrick Henry, a few others. We'll get to those. But the lowlights seem to be weighing them down in the early parts of this year. Kind of felt to me, guys, like the defenses, maybe the offenses haven't quite caught up to the defenses. Offenses are forced to make big plays at the end of halves or at the end of games, which isn't all that odd or uncommon from years past. But maybe these offenses just need to take it up a notch, and then we'll get the kind of stat lines that we want to see week in and week out. We got a lot of games to get through. We're going to talk about the Dynasty reactions, the most important thing that we saw in each game. And as always, we kick things off with a Thursday night, guys. That was a good game, surprisingly good game. The football team comes out on top 30-29. And Terry McLaurin was incredible despite the switch over to Heineke at quarterback. He catches 11 for 107 and a touchdown on 14 targets. But it was the running back for the football team that caught your eye, Matt.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I think McKissick got 1 target, maybe 0 carries or 1 carry and 0 targets, something like that in week 1, right? And we're like, okay, let's go with Antonio Gibson. But this week it was different. McKissick was heavily involved. 4 carries on the ground for 10 yards, got that goal line rushing touchdown on that 2-minute drill towards the end of the half. He was basically the guy in every hurry up in 2-minute situation there was. Obviously a big receiving day as well. So, maybe we need to cool the brakes on Antonio Gibson a little bit, at least for this year. McKissick is a unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. So, he'll be 29 years old. So hopefully he moves on. But at this point, I think we might have to delay at least the consistent production in the receiving game from Gibson for another season.
Yeah, so suddenly J.D. McKissick is once again a flex-worthy candidate, a guy we're going to consider for our lineups in a short-term option. Antonio Gibson, on the other hand, disappointing. 13 carries, 69 yards, and just a couple catches for 4 yards. Didn't find pay dirt. So a disappointment for sure. Speaking of disappointing running backs, Ryan.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley, another subpar game. Obviously coming back from that ACL injury. We still have to factor that in. But it's not looking good. And his performance, along with the performance of a few other running backs, just got me thinking about the running back position as a whole right now. I think we entered the season with a pretty clear top 5 running back group of McCaffrey at 1, and then some combination of Dalvin Cook, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Alvin Kamara. And we've seen more than one of those guys struggle early on. CMC is certainly the RB1 in Dynasty. That I don't think that can really be argued right now. I have no idea who the RB2 is. I don't know. I don't think it's Saquon Barkley, though, for sure. I pulled a Matt and grabbed some recent Dynasty trades from the Trade Finder involving Saquon Barkley. There was one, Barkley for Derrick Henry in a second rounder. That's looking pretty good for the new Henry manager right now. And then another Saquon Barkley for Nick Chubb, even up. So it feels like, based on that limited sample, that Barkley has dropped a tier in running back rankings.
Yeah, it certainly has, Matt.
I thought he looked okay as a runner. He had that long 41-yard run. Of course, that was like one of his 13 carries, and the other 12 carries went for 16 yards. So that's not great. But the most concerning thing for me is the lack of usage in the pass game. Like, this was a game that was back and forth. He could certainly have been involved in that. But only 3 targets, 2 catches for 12 yards. So you expect a guy like that, somebody we're drafting with the one somewhere in the top 5 in startup drafts, or at least in the first round, to be up in that 5 to 6 target a game range, and it just hasn't been there for Barkley yet.
Yeah, and with that coaching staff, really the Giants have never been known, or at least since this coaching staff has taken over, to be a creative bunch. They don't try to get those guys the ball in special ways, and really, when you have a talent like Barkley, it feels like you should create those opportunities for them. They haven't created that. I thought running, even he doesn't look like his regular self just yet. This might be one of those things where it takes till that second year back to become yourself once again. It's disappointing because he's so talented. The main takeaway for me from a Giants perspective, guys, was Daniel Jones. Back-to-back good games, over 20 fantasy points in back-to-back games for the first time since very, very early in his career. Only reached 20 points 6 times coming into this game, 20 fantasy points. He blows by that. 30 fantasy points in a game. A lot of that is based, of course, on his rushing. 9 carries for 95 yards and a score. Also threw a touchdown pass. Didn't make any mistakes, though. Didn't throw into coverage. In fact, hasn't yet this season. There is a chance that he has taken that next step forward and could become that quarterback 2, top 16 type guy. Could be partially the schedule that they've played to this point. He's looked pretty good, and they did have to play the Broncos, which they were blown out in that game and still didn't make a lot of mistakes. Coming up against the Falcons and at the Saints, then at the Cowboys. So we'll have an opportunity to see if us as Superflex managers have a quarterback 2 on our hands with Daniel Jones. Let's move on to the Saints and the Panthers. The Panthers really hammered the Saints 26-7. Sam Darnold was good, 305 and 2 touchdowns, just threw the 1 pick. McCaffrey left the field momentarily, I guess. 72 rushing yards and a score, also caught 5 balls for 65. It was the other side of the field that we need to talk about here, Ryan. Alvin Kamara, just 8 carries for 5 yards in a game that they were losing. I don't mind that. It's that he had 6 targets, just 4 catches for 25. He wasn't involved at any point in that game on Sunday.
No, he really wasn't. And I mean, sadly, those 6 targets were enough to lead the team. And same for his 4 receptions, tied for the team lead. So I guess that's maybe a silver lining, that he was as involved as anybody on that roster. But this is back-to-back games now that the Saints offense has just really not shown up at all. And that sounds silly after what happened in week 1, but so much of that week 1 win over the Packers felt fluky. I mean, Winston had the 5 touchdowns, but he did it on 150 yards and 14 completions. So obviously that type of thing is not something we can draw a lot of information from moving forward. I said all offseason I was worried about this Saints team, the Thomas injury, the Breeze retirement, questions at quarterback, and I'm kind of upset to be right on this one, or to look like I'm right, because I don't know what to do with Alvin Kamara.
I don't know what to do with any of these guys, really. You mentioned the 4 catches from Kamara. Behind that, Marquez Callaway, 2 catches for 8 yards, and then a whole bunch of guys with 1 catch. Little Jordan Humphrey for 27, Juwan Johnson for 23, Chris Hogan for 16. Stop me when you've heard of one of these guys. Deontay Harris for 9 yards on his 1 catch, and then Ty Montgomery goes 1 for 3. They don't have any weapons. They have Kamara, and yeah, he led the team in targets, but those were dump-offs and really not creative looks and opportunities to get him in space one-on-one. He had to work for the 25 yards he got through the air. He worked hard for the 5 yards he got on 8 carries as well. I was taking notes throughout the early games, guys, and my first note on this game was, will the real Jameis Winston please stand up? And I think we saw him today. Once again, we all know who he is. 111 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks, both horribly ugly picks. I guess if you had to play him in a super flex, he gets saved with the 1 touchdown, so you don't get negative points. But Jameis Winston is not a guy any of us can count on moving forward. They go to the Patriots next. Then they get the Giants. I'm keeping him out of my lineups moving forward.
What happened to Marcus Callaway? Is he dead before he even got started, or what?
Certainly feels that way. I spent a lot of money in Fab in a couple of leagues. Ryan, we tag teamed one of those.
I saw a lot of
And
max
it did not
bids
go
on
well for
Callaway.
us. Pretty ugly for sure. Hopefully there's an opportunity for him down the road. I'm starting to think maybe it'll be sooner rather than later that we see Taysom Hill get a start under center. The Bengals and the Bears battled at Soldier Field. The Bears come out on top 20-17 behind Justin Fields, who gets his first opportunity. Just 60 passing yards, only threw 13 passes, did throw an interception and got sacked a couple times. But guys, 10 carries for 31 yards. Most of that is scrambling. In fact, almost all of it is scrambling, plays breakdown. He seemed like he held the ball quite a bit. As far as I could tell, couldn't get the ball to Allen Robinson. I think both of his catches came from Andy Dalton before he got hurt. Luckily, one of them was a touchdown, so he gets bailed out. But from the Bears standpoint, there's not a lot to get excited about offensively. I guess if Justin Fields takes over under center full time, perhaps we have something there. In Cincinnati, though, everything looked good except for Joe Burrow threw 3 interceptions in a row in the second half. Still almost brought him back. Those receivers, though, Ryan, they looked like a 3-headed monster there on Sunday.
Yeah, it was a disappointing game for the Bengals for sure. I know after that big win last week against Minnesota, they were hoping to follow that up this week. Didn't really happen. You mentioned the Burrow 3 interceptions in a row after the long streak of not throwing a pick. So that was frustrating, but I still feel like this trio of wide receivers showed up. Boyd, T. Higgins, and the rookie Jamar Chase, all 3 in double-digit fantasy points. In a way they did, I guess, kind of cancel each other out. I think T. Higgins had 18 fantasy points to lead the way. So that's a pretty good representation of, I think, what we're going to get each week is between 10 and 15 points for all 3 of these guys.
Yeah, if we get 18, 14, and 12 from those 3 guys every single week and a different guy takes the lead all weeks, I think every manager of a Cincinnati big 3 receiver will be excited about that. Joe Mixon, on the other hand, 20 carries for 69 yards. We like the usage there. Just 1 catch, and they were playing from behind. That's a little disappointing. We'll see if something comes of that down the road. Any other takeaways from this game, Matt? Because really, it's kind of boring. David Montgomery, 20 for 61, caught 3 balls. I mentioned Allen Robinson was a little bit of a disappointment. Perhaps the biggest disappointment was Darnell Mooney dropped 2 big plays. He should have had a real big day and was only 6 for 66. Anything for you?
Yeah, not really. I mean, Montgomery feels like he's a volume play, and if you're into that, cool. If not, maybe go ahead and get him off your roster. If he's a depth piece for a contender, like maybe he's your running back 3. Like he's somebody I would consider if I could move him if I can get can I get a late first for David Montgomery right now? I think I probably can just based on volume alone. So that's something I'd consider. But he doesn't seem impressive even against a defense like the Bengals, who I think we still have question marks about.
Yeah, good point. Let's go to Cleveland. The Browns took care of the Texans 31-21. Baker Mayfield, 213 and a touchdown. Also had a rushing touchdown, so that was fine. Nick Chubb, 11 for 95 and a score. But it was another running back in Cleveland that caught your eye, Matt.
Yeah, the rookie. I think you might have been somebody who turned me on to this guy, Dan. That's Demetric Felton, another running back coming up for the Browns. I don't really know if there's enough room for him to be involved necessarily, but if there was an injury to either Nick Chubb or especially Kareem Hunt to take on that kind of change of pace role, plus that Kareem Hunt kind of has, then Felton showed off his receiving ability today. That one 25-yard touchdown run, he bounced off tacklers. You had a nice spin move in there. The contact balance was really impressive to see, and not something that I expected from that rookie. He's kind of like a running back wide receiver hybrid, and I think he might even be listed as a wide receiver in some places and a running back in other places. So it'll be interesting to see where he falls in line from a designation standpoint. But yeah, somebody to keep an eye on. And if he's not on a taxi squad somewhere, he might be in waivers and shallower leagues.
Yeah, and if that's the case, if you're in a deep enough league to hold somebody for the long term, he's certainly worth a look. Just 2 catches for 51 yards, but you mentioned the impressive touchdown. I always liked him coming out of college. He's like one of those jet sweep type running backs.
Yeah.
You can line him up in the slot. You can use him out of the backfield. Nice on screens. He has good hands. So a guy to look long term in the Cleveland backfield. As far as the receivers, though,
They have none.
it was
They're
pretty
gone.
ugly out there.
Got none.
Rashard Higgins had 2 for 27. Donovan Peoples-Jones 1 for 14. Landry gets hurt. He's going to have an MRI early this year. Anthony Schwartz doesn't catch his one target. What are we going to do with these receivers, Ryan?
Yeah, I don't know. Pretty ugly. It's Odell Beckham's second missed game. Of course, Landry went out after his first target, so he essentially missed the entire game as well. Peoples-Jones was a player that a lot of dynasty managers were excited about coming into the season. I know Browns fans were excited about him as well, and he's getting the work. He's running the routes. He's playing the snaps. He's just not producing at all, and now it's 2 games in a row with basically a wide open opportunity because of both competitive games and the other injuries, and he's doing nothing. So that's got to be frustrating. That's obviously a little bit of a deeper dynasty play there with Peoples-Jones, but higher up the ranks, I mean, it feels like Landry's going to miss a few games now, and who knows what is going on with Odell Beckham. So this team is in trouble. That's what gave guys like Felton some opportunity.
Yeah, it looked like it. And if there was one wide receiver on the field that did produce, it was on the other side with Brandon Cooks. 9 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. 14 targets for Cooks. That gives him a 48% target share. Nobody else on the team with more than 2 targets in the game. He's the only one left, but with the Tyrod Taylor injury, it looks like he's not going to play. It's already been announced on Thursday night in week 3. So Davis Mills will be under center. Not quite sure how that'll translate for Brandon Cooks, who honestly, guys, is probably the only player that you want in your fantasy lineup for the Houston Texans right now. He's been good 2 weeks in a row. Everybody else has a blemish to their record, including Mark Ingram, who had a nice week 1, but really fell on his face in week 2. David Johnson still didn't get any opportunities, and because he didn't get into the end zone, he's a bust as well, and there isn't another wide receiver worth considering. It's only Cooks, and even that on Thursday looks like it might be a question mark. Let's talk about the Rams and the Colts, guys. It was all Cooper Kupp all day long. Man, he gets good targets, guys. He is schemed open so often. He goes 9 for 163 and 2 touchdowns on 11 targets. You look at the other receivers for the Rams, and they're not getting the same kind of looks. They're running those flat routes, those quick screens, bubble screens, and crossing routes. Not what we expected, really. Matt, you've always been a Cooper Kupp guy. And in the past, he's been used as that traditional slot. Sometimes he'd get up a seam. Now it feels like through 2 weeks, he's the guy that Stafford loves. In week 1 during Monday Night Football, it was said that Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford's they're BFFs now, and it's showing up on the field.
Yeah, they're breakfast buddies, is what I heard. They eat breakfast together every day. That must be the difference.
Maybe we should start eating breakfast together, Matt. We'd have a little more camaraderie on the show, huh?
Yeah, I mean that could help. You know, I like cinnamon rolls.
Okay, all right.
Some of those delivered.
So the rest of the team, Darrell Henderson got off to a hot start. He went 13 for 53 and a touchdown, but missed some time with injury. And Sony steps in, goes 10 for 46, but doesn't get a target. Robert Woods, 5 for 64, doesn't find pay dirt, so that's a disappointment. How about on the Colts side? Wentz, he goes down too. Touchdown, threw a pick. Jonathan Taylor caught just 1 pass after catching 6 in the first game. That's not going to do it. 15 for 51 and missed on 3 consecutive shots from the goal line to score. That's disappointing. Michael Pittman, though, that's not disappointing, Ryan. 8 for 123 on 12 targets.
Yeah, it's good to see him bounce back. Kind of a quiet week 1 for Pittman. And the story is the same there. Injuries for the Colts at the pass catcher position. We knew T.Y. Hilton would be out. Paris Campbell missed this week. So good to see Pittman step up. Easily, by far, the best game of his young career. 8 catches for 123. And he has to be almost by default the top target in that passing offense. It's another question, just as we were saying with Houston. It's going to come down to the health and status of Carson Wentz. He's not been great, but I think he's going to be a lot better than Jacob Eason. So if Wentz misses, if Wentz misses time with that ankle injury, we'd really, at least I would be avoiding Pittman and everybody else in this offense.
Yeah, Taylor would be the only one to consider, and he really needs to score or be involved in the passing game. Speaking of backs that need to be involved in the passing games, Matt, it's Nyheim Hines, and he was not on Sunday.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was kind of like this is what I was talking about in the intro. Was we kind of got reverse usage from McKissick and Hines. And in week 1, he got Hines had 9 carries and 8 targets. Week 2, 1 carry, 2 targets. So that's not going to help. I know I plugged him in the flex in a couple of spots, and that's not going to get it done, as they say. So I don't really know what to do with him going forward. And if it's not Carson Wentz back there, I mean, I guess I do. Then I guess you just don't play anybody. Going back to Pittman real quick, I want to go back and watch this game. I don't know if either of you watched it closely, but I was shocked to see the box score on this one for him, because I thought he was going to get that Jalen Ramsey treatment, and apparently he didn't, or it didn't matter. But that's one I want to go back and look at.
He made a few catches on Ramsey, but he was moving around a lot. He was the guy that you'd see in motion often and jacked behind another receiver in a double split set, side by side set. So he got a free release a lot of the times. Wentz was under constant duress. He got hammered all game, every play. I was not surprised that he got hurt in this game, because he got hit so many times. You were right, Ryan. Eason, that was not a good start. We're not looking forward to seeing him under center anytime soon in Indianapolis as Dynasty fans. Let's go to Denver and Jacksonville. The Broncos win this one 23-13. Bridgewater did what he always does, doesn't turn it over, throws for 328, which is nice, and 2 touchdowns, most of which went to Cortland Sutton, 9 for 159 on 12 targets. He didn't find the end zone, though. It was Tim Patrick with a short touchdown. Noah Fant got in from 14 yards out as well. With the running back here, the running back situation in Denver, even split, 13 for 64 for Javonte, 13 for just 31 for Melvin Gordon. Both of the targets go to Melvin Gordon as well. He goes 2 for 38. Not a lot really to talk about here. If you started Fant or Patrick, you got bailed out. Sutton did just fine. If you needed Bridgewater in a 2-quarterback league, he was good. You couldn't really start the running backs, though, and I'm not really sure why. It's probably because of the even split and they didn't get any goal line touches. From a Jacksonville perspective, guys, there was a lot to look at, and it wasn't very good. Lawrence threw 2 picks, just 1 touchdown, only threw for 118 yards on 14 completions. James Robinson got all of the carries, really, 11 for 47, while Hyde just went for two carries for 7 yards. I guess you can look at the receivers. DJ Chark was trash, 1 for 19 on 4 targets. Chenault, Ryan, didn't look good either. 2 catches for negative yards and had 1 carry for no yards. I guess Marvin Jones, 6 for 55 and finds pay dirt again on 11 targets. That's going to be the shining star for this Jacksonville offense.
Yeah, there were a few preseason takes that Marvin Jones is the real wide receiver 1 on this team, and we're still early, and obviously Chenault and DJ Chark have more dynasty value, but that's looking pretty true that Jones is the go-to guy here. Last week, Chark saw all the targets and didn't do much with them outside of that long touchdown, but I think he had a dozen targets and 3 catches, if I'm remembering correctly. And now most of those went to Marvin Jones this week. Chenault just disappointing. Not the playmaker that a lot of people thought he would be, at least through 2 weeks.
So that takes us to Buffalo and Miami. Miami couldn't score. Bills went 35-0, and Josh Allen, just the 1 touchdown pass, 35 rushing yards, or excuse me, I think it was 2 touchdown passes, but just 179 yards, guys. So Matt, you've been talking about Josh Allen that you're going to wait and see through this season. Breakout last year, you weren't quite convinced. What do you think through 2 weeks?
I mean, again, it's 2 weeks, so and I guess these are both, we could call both Miami and Pittsburgh tough defenses. But week 1, 17 of 33. Week 2, week 1, 30 of 51, week 2, 17 of 33. Before last season, before 2020, you guys, Josh Allen was a career 56% passer. Through 2 weeks, he's 47 of 84 for 55.9%. So right in that 56% career passer prior to 2020. And it's only been 2 weeks, of course, but he was quarterback 23 in week 1. He was quarterback 14 in week 2, and he's currently the quarterback 21 in points per game. So long season to go, but if he is going to come back to the pack a little bit, I don't see how we can keep valuing him as the quarterback 2 in Dynasty.
Ryan, any thoughts on Allen?
Yeah, it's certainly been a little bit of a slow start. I don't think he is the quarterback 2 in Dynasty.
I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I had Lamar Jackson in that spot right now. Again, only 2 weeks in, and with Dynasty, we're trying to think long term. It's hard to put anybody other than Kyler Murray in that spot right now, and it feels like Murray and Mahomes sure. and everybody else. So yeah, I mean, we saw the same thing with Lamar a couple of years ago. He had the huge MVP year, and then he takes a little bit of a step back. So asking Josh Allen to repeat last year is a tall order, and it can't really be a surprise that he's starting slowly.
Yeah, so he goes 179, 2-1 this week, just 35 rushing yards. Last week, another kind of disappointment, 270, 1 touchdown, no picks, and 44 rushing yards. If Josh Allen's rushing touchdown, which that was ridiculous that it wasn't a rushing touchdown. They say he was giving himself up at the half-yard line because he fell into the end zone. That's garbage. And Moss gets that score. They need to adjust that. I don't like that. Stephon Diggs, 4 for 60, got into the end zone, though. From a Miami perspective, it was all about the Tua injury, Ryan.
Yeah, this was already an offense that we have to be concerned about after what we saw last week. And as you already said, they didn't even score today. Sounds like he's going to miss some time with that. Jacoby Brissett was not good. They're still missing Will Fuller out with a personal issue following that week 1 suspension. So this is looking like an offense to avoid, especially if Tua is out for any time.
Yeah, it was a scary injury. He wobbled off the field kind of and was certainly hobbled. We'll get more news as the week rolls on, but hopefully he can get on the field, because what happened after he left did not look good. The Patriots, they did look good. They went 25-6. Mac Jones didn't really have to do anything. He managed the game, 186, no touchdowns, no picks, didn't have a rushing attempt in the game, really was just there to hold on to the ball and hand it off to Damian Harris and James White. Harris, 16 for 62, and one of the best touchdowns you're going to see this season. James White had another rushing score, 5 for 20 on the ground and 6 for 45. So to me, James White looks like one of them guys, those third down candidates, Matt, that you were talking about earlier. Maybe he can slide into your flex now moving forward. He seems like a guy that's going to get some usage. It was the running back on the other side of the field, Ryan, that caught your eye, though.
Yeah, Michael Carter, the rookie for the Jets, played just 24% of the snaps in week 1 in that 3-man committee, along with Ty Johnson and Tevin Coleman. We saw Tevin Coleman take a big step back in week 2. Carter took advantage of that. He's up to 45% of the snaps and led the way in routes run among running backs as well. Didn't have a huge statistical day, 59 rushing, 29 receiving, but I think that's kind of the start of him taking over that backfield.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way. Something to monitor moving forward as the Jets try to figure out who they really want back there. Schedule is kind of tough. Broncos next week, followed by the Titans. So we'll see how that plays out. You'd like to see the rookie get a few more touches, especially if you invested a 2nd-round pick in him. Matt, you were watching what all of us watched, really. Zach Wilson. It was ugly. At one point, he had more interceptions than completions, finishes the game with 4 picks, and did not look good.
No, he looked kind of like what my concerns with him were coming out was, kind of feeling like he's a little bit overconfident in his arm, thinking he can squeeze passes into places where he has no business trying to it was just putting the ball. Corey Davis didn't really help him out on one of those picks, kind of went right through his hands. But there were the two of the other three picks he threw. It was just like you couldn't really tell what he was even thinking. So be interesting to hear if he gets any questions like that in his post game interviews, to see if he can talk through some of those decisions that he made, because there were just like three defenders around it on one of those that I can recall pretty clearly. So he's tough right now, and I don't really know what his value is right now. We were saying he was undervalued before because he looked pretty good in the preseason. I'm not sure at this point that we can say that anymore. And I might rather have guys like Sam Darnold over him at this point.
I was one of the guys investing in him. I bought him in 2 leagues in the preseason after watching him play. And the thing I liked about him was the athleticism, ability to kind of create on his own, and then that big arm to get the ball downfield and even throw across his body. That gets you into trouble sometimes too. I think that's what you're referring to. And he does that normal young quarterback thing where he doesn't transfer his weight properly. It's sitting on his back foot, and he overthrows when he tries to throw it quickly. So we see that with all these young quarterbacks. I'm not super concerned about it. I'd invest again if I could, and people were going to give a discount on where he was in the preseason. It seems like a lot of people, from what I saw on Twitter on Sunday, are jumping ship when it comes to Wilson. And I don't know. We've seen Bill Belichick make a lot of rookie quarterbacks look bad, so I'm not going to take too much from that game. Not a lot of fantasy takeaways from San Francisco and Philadelphia either. The 49ers win 17-11. Garoppolo 189-1. Also had a rushing touchdown on a quarterback sneak. Elijah Mitchell got banged up, just 17 for 42, caught 2 balls. Debo was great once again, 6 for 93 on 8 targets. So he kind of carries the load as far as receivers go in San Francisco, because Kittle just has 4 catches for 17 yards. A disappointment, Ryan.
Yeah, definitely a disappointment, especially with this Brandon Ayuk situation. Ayuk didn't get the start, as we talked about last week. In week 2, he does get the start, just has 1 catch, though. You would think if he's playing a minor role, that Kittle would be one of the go-tos, or maybe even the go-to option in that passing offense. And through 2 weeks, he really hasn't been. So that's certainly a surprise. You mentioned the Elijah Mitchell injury. Trey Sermon also got injured. Jermichael Hasty also got injured. Debo Samuel also got injured. We'll see which of those guys are back on the field in week 3. Obviously, big impact on this San Francisco offense.
You mentioned, Ryan, that you're not sure who somebody should step into that number 2 role as a pass catcher. And it just doesn't seem like the 49ers want to have a number 2 pass catcher. Really, they want to feed Debo Samuel, and then they dump a lot of balls off to running backs. Hasty had 5 targets in the game. Juszczyk had 3. Elijah Mitchell had a couple as well, and I think one of Ayuk's targets were out of the backfield. So, Jawan Jennings, I think, caught the touchdown pass. That's not really comfortable for fantasy managers. We don't like to see these kind of box scores. And if you watch the game, that San Francisco offense, we can't have much faith in what they're doing right now. Matt, you were watching closely too. You saw Sermon comes on the field, first NFL carry, he fumbles and he gets injured. This is what we expect out of 49ers running backs at this point.
I mean, yeah, and prior to that, I mean, it was exciting that he was going to get that carry, and not what happened after he got that carry. But both he and Ayuk had 0 combined touches or targets in the first half. So like, are we really playing this game with Shanahan now? Like, where he's going to, if you made him upset in practice by not quote unquote working hard enough or whatever it is, like, is this really going to be a thing? Like, it almost felt like it took the Mitchell injury to get Sermon on the field, and certainly we weren't happy with what happened afterwards. But I just, like, when he comes back, if all of these backs are healthy again, I just don't think we can trust really any of them, right? And then Ayuk finally got some action, if you want to call it that, in the second half. 2 targets and just 1 catch for 6 yards. So I don't know what to do with this offense. I feel like despite the fact that the fact that we have all these receivers out or not being targeted should result in big Kittle games, but he had 4 targets today. That was it. Only 5 targets last week. So we need Trey Lance in here to do the rushing, I think, is what the moral of the story is.
It certainly feels that way. The worst thing might be that San Francisco has won both of these games
I know
despite
they're
not
they're
playing
2-0,
well.
so
They're 2 and
yeah,
0.
so they don't need
So
them.
Coach Shanahan doesn't have a lot of reason to make any changes to how he's doing things, and I feel like this is just going to be the story of the 2021 San Francisco 49ers. They're a good team, but they're not good for fantasy. On the other side of things in Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts looked pretty good, Ryan. He ends up with 82 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Doesn't find the end zone through the air, but 190 yards. Had a passing touchdown called back. Plus had the big play to Quez Watkins that a lot of guys score on that play as well. So Hurts certainly looks the part as a quarterback one.
Yeah, he was a big topic of our late off-season shows, and basically the three of us decided we didn't know what to do with him. We didn't know if we trusted him as a quarterback one moving forward. And we're still looking at basically a 5-game sample size from him, three starts and finishes last year, and these 2 weeks so far this season. But he continues to produce. He continues to add a fantasy floor with his rushing. I think we have to value him as a QB1, if not a mid-range QB1, maybe in that quarterback 6, quarterback 7 spot going forward, based on what we've seen these 2 weeks, along with the end of last year.
It was a frustrating day if you were counting on any of his pass catchers. Quez Watkins led the way with 2 catches for 117. Dallas Goedert, 2 for 24. Devonta Smith, 2 for 16. Ertz, 1 for 6. Rager, 2 for 5. Nobody caught more than 2 passes for the Eagles. And there were a lot of us that started either Goddard or Smith or Rager because we had to. And it doesn't look like an offense that we can really depend on for pass catchers. Maybe the one silver lining, Devonta Smith led the team with 7 targets and Rager with 5. So he was trying to get the ball to the outside. It just wasn't working against the San Francisco defense. Let's move on to the Raiders, who upset the Steelers 26-17. Derek Carr was great once again for the second straight week. 382 yards, 2 touchdowns, looked calm and composed, made big plays, got nicked up on one play, but came back for the next series and continued to look good. He hit Henry Ruggs for the long touchdown. Darren Waller was 5 for 65 in the game. So, I don't know if there's a lot of takeaways from a Las Vegas perspective. I think Derek Carr could be that quarterback that's always drafted at the end of the quarterback 2s that ends up being a low-end quarterback 1. He certainly has looked that way for the first 2 weeks. I didn't mention Bryan Edwards' name. He was 3 for 40, which is like, okay, that's fine. He caught all 3 of his targets. He also had a touchdown called back on a penalty. So that's 2 straight weeks where he's involved in the red zone. His quarterback's looking at him and looking at him in the end zone. So something to look forward to. Keep an eye on Bryan Edwards. That breakout could still be happening. From the Steelers' perspective, Ben Roethlisberger looks like old Ben Roethlisberger. 295 and a touchdown through a pick. He's not doing anything special anymore. Najee Harris is. That stiff arm was sweet. 4 catches, 43 yards, and a touchdown, just 10 carries. They were playing from behind for most of the second half. If there's any takeaway for the Steelers, Ryan, Deontay Johnson got hurt on the last play of the game when they were down by 9 points. That's trash. 9 catches, 105 yards on 12 targets. He led the way. But that injury, that sucks.
Yeah, it did not look great. Knee injury, as you said, on what would become the final play of the game. Had to be helped off the field. And, you just hate to see it, obviously, in what was a meaningless play. If he does miss time, maybe that's what, Claypool or Juju need for some actual consistent production. We talked about earlier in the show how the Bengals trio were producing. It doesn't feel the same way with these 3 Steelers wide receivers that we can trust them. It's almost more of a pick 'em game each week, which I haven't been successful with through the first couple weeks.
It's ridiculous that wasn't James Washington running across the middle right there making that catch, because they didn't need Deontay Johnson doing that. One thing I do need in my life is Monkey Knife Fight, guys, and they are sponsoring the DLF Dynasty podcast. Monkey Knife Fight is daily fantasy sports for the rest of us. Even if you've played those other DFS sites in the past, your experience with Monkey Knife Fight is going to feel completely different. No more competing against professional players or working through time-consuming salary caps. With Monkey Knife Fight, you choose from unique, easy-to-play games, including the popular More or Less contest, where you can bet on your favorite NFL player and if they are going to have more or less yards than predicted. You can also play all the other major sports, as well as golf, UFC, NASCAR, and more. Sign up for a new account with Monkey Knife Fight with a first-time deposit and receive a full year of DLF Premium for free. In addition, Monkey Knife Fight will match the deposit total up to $100 with the promo code DLF. That's it. That's all you have to do. Your DLF subscription will be set up within 36 hours, and you'll have access to everything DLF has to offer. So go to dynastyleaguefootball.com, click the image for Monkey Knife Fight, and follow the instructions to get started today. Let's talk about the Vikings, who did such a Viking thing. They missed the field goal at the end. Cardinals beat them 34-33. I don't mean to laugh at the Vikings, Matt.
Yes, you do.
Man, it's just I was watching him line up, and I'm like, I think he's going to miss this, and he just pushed it to the right. He didn't miss it by far, so I guess that's something. The real story of the game for the Vikings was Kirk Cousins. He looked good, 244, 3 touchdowns, didn't make any mistakes. Dalvin Cook needs to find the end zone to put the cherry on the top of these games. 22 carries, 131 yards. That's great. Just 2 catches for 17. But if he finds pay dirt, he's playing like the number 2 pick in fantasy drafts, and maybe is that high-end RB1 that we want him to stay going into next season. It's going to come with Dalvin Cook. We're just not sure when. The Cardinals, Matt, Kyler Murray he might be the quarterback 1 right now. 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, threw the 2 picks, but 31 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown make him elite. Speaking of elite, Matt, Rondale Moore, 7, 114 and a score on 8 targets. Looked good.
Man, this is what we were waiting for with Rondale Moore. Like the combination of Kyler Murray able to scramble around, evade tacklers, evade rushers, and then be able to find Rondale Moore, who is, weaving through the defense, following his quarterback, looking for that comeback, is like, that just doesn't seem fair. The combination of those two, and he led the team in targets today, had that long touchdown. It wasn't even just a short pass. It was 20, 30 yards downfield. He found the open spot while Murray evaded the rush and got it and took it the rest of the way in. It wasn't even one of his patented catch the ball short and then run for a long time and bounce off tacklers. It was just a straight up good play by both of them. And if he's going to add that to his repertoire, this is like the PPR cheat code. He's going to lead the team in targets in situations like this. He's going to be a target that's easy for Murray to find in the short areas of the field. And now if he's going to add this part to the game, like it feels like this is the wide receiver everybody should have taken at the end of their first round rookie drafts at this point. I did want to mention real quick on the Minnesota side, Adam Thielen, 14 touchdowns last year, and it just felt like regression is coming, right? There's no way he's going to catch 14 touchdowns again, but he caught 2 in week 1. He caught another one today. So he seems to be the guy in that area of the field. And then I guess we should mention KJ Osborne again, because nobody was talking to him about him at all. And now he's not leading the team in targets this week, but getting a significant target share, leading the team in yardage this week as well.
Yeah, 5 for 91 for Osborne, scored the long touchdown in the first quarter on 6 targets. Justin Jefferson, not that I was annoyed or anything, but had a couple kind of disappointing plays. He had a drop on a long ball in the fourth quarter. Also looked like he gave up on a route before Cousins delivered the ball to him. So that looked like an overthrow, but I think Justin Jefferson took his foot off the gas on that one. In Arizona, it feels like all these guys are useful. Christian Kirk was 3 for 65 on 4 targets. That doesn't sound like much. He was wide open on a seam route, and Kyler Murray got pressure and couldn't get him the ball. He was open multiple times. Hopkins, just 4 catches, but found pay dirt, 54 yards. A.J. Green even found the end zone. And Max Williams, what the hell? 7 catches for 94 yards. One of them was on a tip ball, ended up going for like 30 yards. So he catches all 7 of his targets. I don't know. There's going to be people picking him up on the waiver wire, not to play, hopefully. How about the Falcons? They really got hammered by the Buccaneers guys, 48-25. Matt Ryan made a bunch of mistakes late in the game, but threw for 302 scores. Even so, he didn't look good in week 1. He didn't look very comfortable in week 2 either. Luckily, Ridley finds the end zone. He goes 7 for 63, and that's good. That's pretty good, I guess. Kyle Pitts was good, 5 for 73. Mike Davis, we talked about him as a potential bust. He looks like a bust, Ryan. Does not look good.
No, he's not good. He was bailed out in this game with his work in the receiving game. If you're if you're in a PPR league, he caught 7 balls. That alone is going to get you a respectable score, and he ends up with 50 or 60 yards total. But Cordarrelle Patterson simply looked better, more explosive. He was the guy making plays. He scores twice, once on the ground, once as a receiver. And this is the team that's going to be behind in virtually every game this year. They are not good. Their defense is worse than their offense. And I think I would rather have Patterson than Mike Davis at this point, which feels crazy to say.
And with that poor defense, they're going to be throwing, but that offensive line is so poor that they can't give Ryan enough time to get the ball down the field. Ridley looked back at Ryan multiple times in the game like, what kind of throw was that? I'm wide open on a 10-yard out route, and you sail it to the sideline. So that's frustrating for sure as a Calvin Ridley apologist. Tom Brady, 276 and 5 touchdowns, got the ball to everybody that matters, except Antonio Brown, who goes 1 for 17, 2 touchdowns for Evans, a touchdown for Chris Godwin. And then there's Gronkowski, who catches 2 more, both in the first half, 4 for 39 through the air. And he looks like a mismatch on the field. You can't dedicate a safety to guarding Rob Gronkowski because they have so many weapons on the outside that those guys have to stay deep to keep Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown out of the end zone. There's a chance that Gronk not only ends up as a tight end 1 this season, guys, but he could end up a high-end tight end 1 based only on touchdown upside. We're probably looking at double-digit touchdowns, maybe even 14. That doesn't sound like, oh yeah, you're over-exaggerating, but it's within the realm. He could even end up as a top 3 tight end, guys. What are you paying for Rob Gronkowski on a contender if you're streaming tight ends right now?
I think it's a great question and something that contending teams have to be considering because if you look at the tight end landscape right now, and those low end tight end 1s based on our rankings, based on ADP, we're talking about Evan Ingram hasn't been on the field yet. Irv Smith, he's out for the year. Mike Gesicki has struggled through 2 weeks. Cole Kmet has struggled through 2 weeks. Johnny Smith and Hunter Henry are canceling each other out. Adam Troutman, he's part of a committee. Pat Freiermuth, part of a committee. These are all guys that are from, let's say, tight end.
You are painting an ugly picture there, Ryan.
The picture I'm painting is that Rob Gronkowski might be a dynasty tight end 1.
Right.
Even if that means he's giving you 15 more games and he retires at the end of the season. If you're a contender, that's worth more than Jonnu Smith or worth more than Adam Troutman or somebody like, guys like that are currently ranked ahead of him and were valued ahead of him entering the season. The trade, the trade question that you proposed is an interesting one because you have to think about, who else could you get if you're talking about a second rounder. A bad team has Gronk and you're offering a second rounder. Maybe you could get Logan Thomas with that same pick. So those are the types of names you have to consider, I think.
Yeah, I doubt, at least in the leagues that we play in, it's going to be hard to get a guy like Logan Thomas for a second. I suppose that is happening somewhere. I'm happy to give up a second on a true contender. If you're being honest with your roster, Matt, I'd love to know what you think. If you're a true contender, are you willing to give up that second round pick for Gronk?
I am. I just not sure if that's available. I mean, are there that many teams out there that are not competing that still have Gronk on their roster? If there are, then absolutely I would go out and pursue that. It just seems like a difficult situation. I don't think he's on any not competing teams in any of the leagues that I am, but I'm certainly going to go check. I'm not going to pay a first just because, like Ryan said, it may be just a 1-year thing, maybe 2 years. Maybe he plays as long as Brady does, and this is what we have out of this offense if they can keep everybody together for yet another year. But I think a first is too much at this point. Just go back over to Atlanta real quick. I don't know if you guys followed Ken Kelly at all or read his Dynasty Aftermath, which you should be reading because it's one of the best weekend wrap-ups. But he's threatened to fire me 3 times in the past week. over Kyle Pitts. But I just want to say,
I contacted him to make sure we should have you on the show, man.
I'm glad you did that. But I just wanted to point out, Ken, that through 2 weeks, despite no touchdowns yet, and I guess if you want to call it a poor week one, he's the tight end 8 right now, so he's still a tight end 1. So I think I should keep my job at least based on that.
So what? Come on.
Well, if that's the case, then you should pay way more for Gronk because he's a tight end 1.
It's true. It's true. He's the tight end 1 overall. And, instead of making a big trade for Pitts, I probably should have just bought Gronk for a second.
Yeah, Gronk is a guy I want to go get. I'm offering, like, I'm starting with a second plus one of those young players that hasn't done anything. A Denzel Mims type guy, something that maybe somebody says, well, at least I'm getting something on top of the second. That's the kind of league, the kind of trade I'm looking for. Let's jump over to the Dallas and LA game. Dallas ends up kicking a late field goal to win 20-17. Dak Prescott didn't do anything really exciting in this one. 237 through an interception, didn't find the end zone through the air. Zeke looked better, 16 for 71 and a score, 2 catches for 26. But it was Tony Pollard that got on the field even more, 13 carries, 109 yards, and a rushing touchdown, plus caught 3 balls. So the usage is intriguing. There were reports out of Dallas this week that said that coaching staff wants to work in Tony Pollard. They called it a long season and said we got to keep Zeke healthy to the end of the year because we feel like we're a contender. That all makes sense. Zeke still got his. So as a Zeke owner, you have to be fine with what happened. You just wish he would have got a couple more touches, like those Tony Pollard touches where it felt like he had a wide open field to run through. Zeke had to work for all his. It really felt like maybe defenses aren't keying on Pollard being a running back in the middle of the field just yet. CeeDee Lamb caught 8. Amari Cooper only caught 3 and got banged up. So Dallas is Dallas. Everybody really stayed status quo except for maybe Tony Pollard, who steps up a little bit. In LA, though, Ryan, Mike Williams, for the second straight week, impressed. 7 catches for 91 yards and a touchdown on 10 targets. Dude, he's going to get hurt. He keeps falling hard on his head. He's not going to make it through 17 games doing this.
He's probably going to get hurt. He gets hurt every year. But, he also pops with these big games every year as well, once or twice. The difference is the way he's being used in this new offense, and it's a good thing for him. It's a good thing for you if you have him on your dynasty team, because he's now gone from that fringe guy to a weekly starter. You put him in your lineup no matter what. Yes, one of those weeks he's going to get hurt and frustrate you, but as long as he's on the field, he's going to produce. He out-targeted Keenan Allen again today in this week 2 game. I'm kind of all in on Mike Williams right now.
Yeah, I like to hear that because I was a big Mike Williams fan coming out. I like to see the step forward, I guess, that he's taken. He also feels like a bigger presence on that offense. Like maybe this coaching staff appreciates him a little bit more than the past coaching staff did. Speaking of which, Austin Eckler, he was a bigger presence, Matt, in week 2 than he was in week 1, especially in the passing game. He caught 9 balls for 61 yards.
Yeah, last week 0 targets, fantasy community panicking, and this week back to his normal 10 targets a game, 6, 7, 8, 9 catches today. So I think we're good to go there. Didn't get a touchdown today like he did last week, but it wasn't really that kind of game. This was kind of a passing matchup for the Chargers. So it kind of makes sense. And you don't want him to be carrying the ball too much between the tackles anyway. So it was good to see him get back to what we know and we love Austin Eckler for.
Yeah. Speaking of running backs, getting back to what we know and we love, Derrick Henry, we saved the best for last. 35 carries, 182 yards and 3 touchdowns. And get this, caught all 6 of his targets for 55 yards. Probably a top 10 scoring game in your league's history for a single player. He was incredible. The Titans end up winning in overtime 33-30 in Seattle. Tannehill didn't throw a touchdown pass. So Julio, while he went 6 for 128, if that touchdown counts, we're all clapping. We're all excited about Julio, his big breakout with the Titans. It didn't. A.J. Brown he only caught 3 balls. He dropped that many in the game. He was a massive disappointment. But I don't know how you can talk about this game at all, Ryan, without talking about Derrick Henry, because despite dynasty managers consistently thinking, oh, he's got to be over the hill at some point, and how many years can you have 300 plus touches and take that kind of beating? He looked as good as ever on Sunday.
Yeah, he did, and it's all about the receiving work that he got, which feels a little crazy in a game where he carried it 35 times for 182. He scored 3 times on the ground. That's kind of the Derrick Henry that we already expected. But if he's adding the 6 catches for 55 yards, both of those are new career highs. He had never had more than 4 catches in a game, and had never even had more than 5 targets in a game. So if that's not a fluke, if that's part of the game plan moving forward, and honestly, with the way the passing offense has struggled through the first couple games. I mean, Tannehill has been bad. A.J. Brown has been bad. Julio Jones struggled in week 1, was a little better in week 2. But if getting the ball to Henry and just letting him run over people is part of the plan, then yeah, it's going to be another huge year for him from a dynasty and fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, it certainly looked that way. Stop me if you've heard this before, but Tyler Lockett had a big game. Once again, 8 catches on 11 targets for 178 and a touchdown. That follows up his 4 for 102 scores in week 1. So he's looking like a wide receiver 1 once again. This is what happened. It feels like every year. He goes on these stretches and then disappoints. Hopefully this isn't the year, because, man, he can get open down the field. Usually it's at the cost of DK Metcalf. I guess that was the case in week 2. Once again, DK Metcalf, 6 catches for 53 yards in the game, and didn't find the end zone once again, despite getting 11 targets. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. Russ, though, 343 and 2. There were a lot of negatives that we talked about, as we mentioned in the lead, guys. But there were some positives, including Henry, and there, while we'll be disappointed with some of the finishes and certainly upset or frustrated with the injuries, we should all just be happy that football's back, right?
After the afternoon games, yeah. After the morning games, it was questionable. That's
oh man, every
morning,
game, every match, every fantasy matchup I looked at, I was disappointed, so I stopped looking. And then everybody started scoring points, so it got a little bit better. The injuries, though, I think that's the story from week 2.
It has to be. There were just so many quarterbacks, which obviously is always going to be the story if there's an injury to the quarterback position. Fortunately, it looks like most of those are going to be minor. Maybe that means a week or 2, but of the dozen plus injuries that we saw, I'm not sure any of them were season enders. We may learn that that's not the case, unfortunately, but yeah, just so many making an impact on the NFL and on fantasy leagues.
Yeah. So for all the injuries and the disappointments, there were the Cooper Kupps and the Rondale Moores and the positive things that came out of the games in week 2 as well. So that's going to do it for this episode of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I'm Dan. That's Ryan. Over there is Matt. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you in week 3.